So just a little bit about me. So I'm actually from Poplarville originally. I went to Poplarville High School, graduated from there in 2002. So I went to PRCC right after high school and actually attended Resurrection Life back then while I was in junior college. So I went to church here way back then. When I started, Resurrection was still in the old blue building down the highway, and then moved to the mall, the other mall area, is what's called the.
Youth meet right now.
Oh, is that
That's where they're meeting over
Gotcha. Okay. So services started taking place over there, and then they eventually moved here. So it's been a while since I've been here, been back in the sanctuary. But so anyway, I went to church here for a couple years. So I was in junior college, and then I went to USM, got my music education degree, and I've been a band director for, this is my 16th year as a high school band director, 6th grade band, middle school band, high school band. So I've been, oh man, someday, you know, lots of life questions, a lot of days. But I love it. Elisha had mentioned that I played with Adam Doliak, so you may not know who he is, but he's a Mississippi native guy, and he's in Nashville now. He's kind of doing some big stuff now, but I played with him for about 7 years while I was the assistant band director at West Jones. I was able to tour a good bit, and so it got to a point where I had to make some big life decisions because Adam was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was either going to have to move to Nashville to do that full time, which would mean like quit teaching. So I kind of had a big decision on my plate. My wife, she and I had just met, and the head director at the time at West Jones was about to retire, and I was in line to be promoted to the head band director. So there was a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of prayers, and I really felt like the Lord was pulling me out of that whole gigging scene, because there's a lot of darkness in that world. I spent lots and lots of time in Nashville, got to meet some big time producers, got to do some really cool stuff, but looking back on it, there's a lot of darkness surrounding a lot of that, and so there was a lot of big life changes. Like I said, I met my wife, and I was in line to be promoted to be the head band director. So I pretty much gave up that whole gigging scene. My church that I play at is in Hattiesburg, and I've been playing there for 20-something years now. Pretty much when I moved to USM after I finished PRCC, I got plugged into my church that I'm at. So I've been there for like 20-something years. It's Trinity Heights Church of God in Hattiesburg. It's on Highway 49 if you're going towards Jackson.
The AG Church. A friend of mine, Travis Meadows.
I know that name.
He's a songwriter in Nashville now.
I know that name.
I used to play with him. I used to tour with him.
Yeah.
And Keith Thibodeau, the drummer. I love Lucy, Little Ricky.
Yeah.
David the Giants. Yeah.
Nice.
But Travis he did some stuff with the Assembly of God churches. Yeah.
Nice. So tonight, I was telling Elisha, it's kind of funny. This is so different for me. I'm used to working with, 6th graders and middle schoolers and high schoolers. So this is definitely a different setting for me. So it's kind of getting me out of my box to work with grown adults. So forgive me if if there's a moment when I talk like a band director or think like a band director, because I'm just so used to doing that. But so I made myself an outline of some stuff tonight, and I made a handout to give to you guys. And I may not be telling you anything brand new tonight. I may not be giving you any new information. But like Elisha said, even if I could just help with one thing that you could take away, that'd be great, and I'd be happy with that. And I'm sure, if we were to sit around and chat, there's plenty I would learn from you guys. I'm sure there's a lot I can learn from you and take away. So I've got a little handout I'm going to go ahead and give, and I didn't know how many to make, but I made plenty. And I'll kind of, stepped on my Diaz.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah. All right, so the first page, I titled it The Bethel Bass Formula. So I'm a huge fan of Bethel music. And about 2-3 years ago, I started really paying attention to their bass tone and the bass sound at Bethel, and I like fell in love with it. And the more I listened to it, the more I started to pick up on the fact that like their bass tone is kind of aggressive and grungy and overdriven and distorted. So I kind of started doing a lot of research and try to figure out like how are they getting that sound. And it was kind of humorous. At one point, I even tried to Facebook message Brian Johnson, Pastor Bill Johnson's son. And I tried to even ask him, like, hey, man, how are your bass players? Like, what are they using? Of course, he never responded. But after doing some deep dives and doing a lot of research and talking to some people over in Reading, and I did get to chat with Tanner Erickson, who's one of their bass players. I started to figure out how they're getting that tone. And the funny part is that every single one of their bass players, no matter who, because they have several, no matter who it is, they all have the same formula. Like there is this one formula that they all use. So I kind of put down here, it's very, very specific. So what is it? The Bethel bass sound can be described as aggressive, grungy, edgy, distorted, overdriven, heavy, etc. Why this sound? And that's a question I was asking a lot of people, like why do they use that sound? So Bethel doesn't use traditional rhythm guitarists in the sense that you have somebody on electric who's just holding down the chord progression with some overdrive. Like they don't use a traditional rhythm guitarist. So the bass player helps fill that gap. So since that sonic space is available, you don't have like the Angus Young from AC/DC, you know.
They're filling the frequency range.
That's right.
That would have been filled by a guitar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why that sound works so well. So the bass player fills that gap. And of course, those guys, they have just the best audio engineers on the planet. So once they know how to take that tone and just blend it really, really nicely. So after doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of people, I figured out like exactly what their formula is. And now because of the church I play in and my personal setting at church, I don't use their formula exactly, but what I use and like my sound and all is very much inspired by their formula. But so this is, and I'm a huge gear nerd, like I will talk gear for hours nonstop. Like I've tried this pickup, well I've tried this pickup, and I've tried these strings. I can go for hours talking gear. So this is basically, if you hear Bethel bass players, this is what you're hearing. They all use, for the most part, a Fender Jazz bass, a passive Fender Jazz bass, and they all have installed Lawler pickups. Like, they're fantastic. They are fantastic. So I know, like, Adam Kaiser, Tanner Erickson, Matt Ogden, David Funk. Like those are some of their primary bass players. They've all installed the Lawler pickups in their jazz bass. And so on the jazz bass, the interesting thing is 95% of the time, they only use the neck pickup. So, you know, a jazz bass has two pickups, and I found it really interesting that they almost always just use the neck pickup. They usually have the bridge pickup. Well, I mean, it darkens the sound.
It's because the mid-range of the bridge pickup interferes with that. It eats up too much space.
Yeah, and I have a 5-string jazz bass that you could put it in passive or active. So a lot of times I'll roll in the neck pickup, put it in passive mode, and literally get the exact, you know, basically the same exact thing they're doing.
What pickup?
This is my 4-string P bass. So this is my Mike Lowell bass, and this has a Lindy Fralin pickup in it.
Oh, the Lindy Fralins are good too.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
The Lawlers just have more output.
And they're pretty bright too. The Lawlers are very, very bright. So they all use Lawler pickups. They run the tone knob wide open, and they always use Diodario strings. For a while, I think most of them were using the Nickel XL, which have been around for years and years and years. But I think now they're mostly using the Diodario NYXL strings, which have been on the scene for a few years. And that's actually what I use on mine. I love them. I have been through so much of a string journey over the years. I mean, I have tried so much. I would be afraid to go back and add up how much I've spent in my string journey. I would probably kick myself if I saw.
Your wife would kick you.
Yes.
Your wife would kick
Well, my wife is a great drummer, so she has spent, on cymbals or
Kids.
drum throne.
Yeah.
Usually when I get a Christmas gift for her or whatever, it may be a new kick pedal or it may be, a new cymbal. Like, that's always my go-to gift for my wife. Yeah. So that's the bass. And funny enough, they all use the same pick. And it's these. Like, every Bethel bass player uses this one. It's the .88 millimeter. And I've even watched some like YouTube videos or some Instagram lives with them talking about it, and all of them say the same thing. They're like, it's just the perfect thickness to get the song, the tone we're going for. Any thicker might be different, any thinner would be different. So they all use these, and this is what I use too when I'm using a pick. And one thing I learned that's very, very interesting. And I was watching a video with Matt Ogden, he's been one of their primary bassists for a long time. And one thing he was showing is that when they pick, because they use a pick almost exclusively when they're playing, the bass players at Bethel, they're almost always playing with a pick. So one thing I learned is that they're not just plucking straight down. They always pick at an angle and get a sort of a scrape sound. So instead of, they angle it and get that scraping, and it adds a bit more texture. So that's one thing I took away from what they do. So when I'm playing with a pick, I always make sure that I angle it and get that slight scrape, as opposed to very different.
I think it also, when you have that scrape, it works better with that overdrive.
It does.
It gives you
It
more
adds that
frequency.
texture.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's that's one of the big parts of that formula, is that they always angle the pick and do a little bit of a scrape. So I've done a deep dive on what effects they use. And so each of them has some slight variations, like all the main Bethel bass players, they have a few slight variations between one another, but there's a few things they all have in common. So a tuner, obviously, and this is, I put the order of the signal chain, like these effects that they run, this is listed in the order of the signal chain. So first is a tuner. Now some of the Bethel bass players have a separate buffer. And I'm not going to go into a deep dive on buffers, but basically if you're playing a passive instrument, something needs to be buffering the signal, or you're going to have some treble loss over a long cable run. Like if you're using a passive bass and a passive DI, you're going to have some treble loss over the length of the instrument cable and the XLR cable. So you want your signal buffered somewhere. So some of the Bethel bass players have a separate buffer, but I love the TC Electronic Polytune because it has a fantastic built-in buffer. So I put two really, really good recommendations on here for tuners that have a built-in buffer. This one,
That's the too old.
yeah, the Boss TU3 is another very, very popular one. It has a built-in buffer. Now the Boss TU3, the buffer is on all the time.
Yeah.
This one has some side switches, so you can run it buffered or true bypass. So I run it buffered, and it's a high quality buffer. So the next pedal that you'll see every Bethel bass player use, I don't have it, and I'll talk in a little bit about what I have in its place. The Electro Harmonics bass microsynth pedal. Every single Bethel bass player has that on their pedal board, and they use that as their biggest gain stage. So that's to kind of be used sparingly and in some of the biggest final sections of a song. Every one of them has that pedal on their pedal board. And I even went and I was able to find Adam Kaiser and Tanner Erickson's settings on the bass microsynth, and I wrote them down just in case you ever decide to, give it a try. both of those bass players at Bethel pretty much set theirs at the same place. So I put those settings on there if you ever decide to go down that avenue. It is. So it's basically, it's an octave pedal, but it also has some fuzz, like square wave built into it. And what many of them have said, and listening to some interviews of them, is that the tone hammer pedal, which I'll get to in a little bit, helps tame the microsynth. So they've all said that if you were to run that microsynth just straight into a regular DI, it's going to be insane. But running it into the tone hammer helps tame it. So in its place, just for a few various reasons, I have an octave pedal. So it's kind of serves the same purpose as the micro synth, but it's not quite as insane. So the church where I play every Sunday, we just have one keys player, one electric guitar, bass, and drums. And we don't have backing tracks. So it's not like a really dense instrumentation or a dense mix. So there's a lot of things that if I were playing on a worship team that had like backing tracks, more instrumentation, I would be more prone to do a lot of exactly what Bethel does. I would probably get the micro synth, but it would kind of stick out like a sore thumb in my church and in my particular setting. So that's one reason I have this octave pedal instead, and I could get to that in a minute. So the next thing that you're going to see on all the Bethel bass players boards is some variation of like a second gain stage distortion or fuzz pedal, and I went through and put what some of them use, and this is for like a second gain stage for some heavier lifted moments of a song. So David Funk, he uses the JHS Kilt version 1, which is no longer made. It's now the V2. And the V1, there's actually some stuff it does that the V2 doesn't do that I've heard him talk about. Adam Kaiser uses the Walrus Audio Ages. Tanner Erickson uses a Solo Dallas Schaefer Replica Bass X. I follow all these guys on Instagram, and I'll zoom in on their pedal boards, and I'll see I just nerd out over that stuff. I really do. But kind of the tried and true distortion pedal that the Bethel bassists have been using for a long time are the Rat bass pedals. So Proco has made the Rat for many, many, many years, but the stock version of that Rat is not the best for bass because it has a lot of low-end cut. Yeah. Yeah. So it's super trebly, and there's not a lot of low end. So like, for example, Tanner Erickson had one that he had modded to allow more low end. But some companies have come through and made some Rat-based pedals, and they made it to work really well for bass. And I actually have one on the way that I'm super excited about. I just ordered one a few days ago. So some Rat variants that I listed are the Commodore Rat bass, which is the one I ordered like a few days ago. Those are made in Spain, so it's making its way over from Spain. So it's going to take a few days before it gets to me. The Blue Colander Tremon Mini is a great one, Jam Pedaler Rattler bass. Those are just a few examples of really good Rat clones that work great for bass, that are going to be more appropriate than what the traditional Proco Rat is. So now is the key, the Aguilar Tone Hammer DI. That is the centerpiece of the whole Bethel bass sound. And when I was doing my deep dive into finding out how are they getting that bass tone at Bethel, that's the primary answer, the Aguilar Tone Hammer DI. So that is, just that pedal alone is 95% of the Bethel bass sound. If you that one pedal will get you in the ballpark of that Bethel tone. And there's a very specific way they run it. I've looked at photos and videos of several of theirs, and they all have very similar settings within a little bit of a range. So, I wrote on there, that's the most essential component of the Bethel sound. The pedal is always on. And the pedal has what they call it AGS. I think that stands for like adaptive gain stage. I don't remember. But basically without that, the pedal's a lot more clean. With the AGS on, that's where you get the overdrive. And of course, you can run it passive, and it's way cleaner. So that's just like if I were going into a regular DI, but when I engage it, you get that grunge. And of course, you know, some of them dial the gain up to where they get a lot more hair on the signal. And that's what you're going to hear, that Bethel bass tone. That's the core of it.
I didn't even realize it till, you know, we have that practice thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard the isolated thing and when the bass came in, it sort of freaked me out.
Yeah.
That's a dirty bass.
Yeah, super dirty.
I mean, it surprised me.
And that's 95% of it. That Aguilar tone hammer pedal is 95%
well, you just
of it.
don't realize how well it was in the mix.
Yeah.
Until it's isolated. When it's isolated,
That's right.
Man, that's a hairy sound.
Yeah.
In the mix, it sounded tremendous and bassy.
Yep. And, you know, on those lines, there's a lot of just famous classic rock songs that you would be surprised if you heard the isolated bass, how overdriven and distorted they are. That when you listen to the track, I mean, like tons of just famous classic rock songs, you just hear the track and it just sounds so good. But, you know, you can go on YouTube and hear some of the isolated bass tracks and you're like, whoa. Like, for example, Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots. Well, you just hear the song, bass sounds great, but if you go listen to the isolated bass track, it is super grungy, like very. So it's just crazy how you could take that sound and it blends so well, and a good sound engineer just knows exactly what to do with it. So the interesting thing about the tone hammer though is Aguilar just very, 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 very recently discontinued it because rumor is they're about to come out with a new version of it. Korg purchased Aguilar like a year or two ago, I think. Was it Korg? Do you remember?
I don't remember who it was.
I think
they've purchased a lot of people.
I think it was Korg. So anyway, Aguilar got bought out by another company, and they've been remodeling some of their stuff. So I think they're about to come out with a new version of that. But this is like the meat and the potatoes of the Bethel bass sound. And I put on here kind of the settings that you're going to find from all the Bethel bass players, where the knobs are set. And I've got mine pretty much set exactly where they do. And the last component that you're going to see on all the Bethel bass boards, they all use a separate DI. Now, I just go straight out of the tone hammer. It has a great DI, but all those Bethel guys, they run the Rupert Neve RNDI after the tone hammer, and that's where they send their signal to the front of house. And I think they just do it for that extra little 1% of that tone magic, you know. But to me, in my personal setting, it's just not worth buying a bigger pedal board to fit that on, spending the extra money for that separate DI just to maybe add 1% more of that tone magic. But you're going to find that DI on every Bethel bass player's pedal board. Korg?
Since 2020.
That's right. So ever since Korg bought out Aguilar, they've been slowly revamping some of the stuff. So they just discontinued the tone hammer, but I would not be surprised if a new version came out soon. But
that Rupert Neve RNDI, they like that because it's got the, you know what Neve is mainly console.
Yes.
$100,000 console.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that preamp.
Yeah. I had one at one point.
Studio quality preamp, and they're amazing.
Yeah, I owned the RNDI at one point, and it's phantom power. The Neve RNDI is phantom power only, which is interesting. So on the back of that page, so there's for people who are interested in maybe pursuing that Bethel bass sound, there's actually an easier, simpler, and cheaper way to go after it. So y'all are probably familiar with the Line 6 HX Stomp. My church has one that our guitar player uses. So I've fiddled with it a lot. I love it. So a lot of the Bethel guys, I think it might have been David Hislop who started this, but Tone Factor, the Tone Factor website, I think the electric player, David Hislop, who's probably one of my favorite electric guitarists in the world, I think he was the one who started the Tone Factor company. And they basically, a lot of these guys have patches for the HX Stomp. So Matt Ogden, along with a few others, actually have their Bethel signature bass rig patch for the HX Stomp, and that's like $20. I've listened to them, and I think it gets you pretty much 90% accurate and like as good of what the analog stuff is going to get you, but for way cheaper. And you could find those HX Stomps, used. I saw one today for $4.95. I think brand new they go for like $6.50, but you could find them used all the time for like under $500 easily. And then the patch is $20. But there's Matt Ogden has a fantastic YouTube video where he goes over those presets, but it's not just the presets. He talks a lot about how he gets his tone. That's the video where I learned how they angle the pick to get the scrape instead of the straight pluck. He talks about that in that video. There's a lot of just fantastic information. He talks about his tone hammer. So that patch for the HX Stomp, like it gets you the tone hammer sound, then the second gain stage distortion, and the bass micro synth. So it'll get you all three of those in that patch. So will it sound 100% as good as the real analog gear? No, but it'll be 90% as good.
Nice PA system, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nobody in the congregation will ever.
Nobody.
They released a
Nobody.
version 2 of the tone hammer.
So that's the full amplifier.
Yeah.
So the amp head. I have the version 1 Tone Hammer 700 amp head. So yeah, they've updated the amp head, and I think next is going to be the preamp DI.
I was looking it up. There's a demo. There's a guy who reviewed it. Like he got a sneak peek or something.
Of the
video again.
Of the pedal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice. I need to find that.
It was he released it May 24th this year.
Okay, nice. And sorry about the little phone. I've got my phone plugged in, so in a little bit I could play some tracks. So I think that's what you're kind of getting, some of that interference, maybe from this aux cable. All right, so the next part, I have a little bit on like what I'm personally using. And so this is my pedal board that I keep at my church. I mean, it belongs to me, but I always keep it at my church. I grabbed it to bring with me for this. This is like my worship music pedal board. So if I'm playing at church, or if I'm going to do a worship gig or service, like I'm using this pedal board because gets me in the ballpark of the Bethel sound. So first in my chain is that TC electronic polytune, and I've got the buffer engaged because I'm using a passive bass. So I've got it buffered at the very beginning of my pedal board. So the next pedal, which I use in place of the bass micro synth, is a 3-leaf audio octave. It was made, Tim LaFave, I don't know if you are familiar with the bass player Tim LaFave. He's absolute top notch. So he helped collaborate on that pedal, and that's why the octave is spelled sort of like he spells his last name. Yeah. So that's what I'm using in place of the micro synth. And like I said on the paper, I use that because my church has a smaller instrumentation in the band, so our mix isn't as full and dense. The octave is a bit more polite. If we had more instruments on stage or backing tracks to fill out the mix, I would definitely use the bass micro synth. So one thing I'll note about any analog octave pedals, because even the bass micro synth is an analog pedal and it's octave. All analog octave pedals are kind of tricky in their tracking, and sometimes I'm even hesitant to play with a pick if I'm using my octave pedal, because you can get some glitches out of it. I'll see if I can make it glitch. There it is. You heard the glitch?
That's just like the old OC2, OC3
Yep.
Boss. If you go below the A string D, if you go to the C sharp, it glitches a little bit.
Now playing fingerstyle, I can play all the way down to a low A all day long. It will not glitch out. The reason is because the way an analog octave works, it finds the strongest harmonic, because when you play a note, there's lots of overtones coming out. It locks on to the strongest one. So when you're playing with a pick, you have a lot more overtones, a lot more harmonics, it's a lot more trebly. So sometimes it confuses the octaver and it doesn't know which harmonic to latch on to. But when you play fingerstyle, that, it's a lot more mellow, it doesn't have all those overtones. But the Bethel guys, when they're using the jazz bass with just the neck pickup, that kind of helps a little bit because you don't have the bridge pickup giving some of those overtones. So I could play fingerstyle and it'll track all, it will never glitch out when I'm playing fingerstyle. And A flat, it's holding the G.
That's good.
F sharp is where it glitched. So it went all the way down to the G tracking.
3-leaf audios are really nice.
And I'll tell you, acquiring that was a nightmare because so the guy who builds it, it's a one-man shop located in Seattle, Washington, and he only builds like a few little batches per year. So he'll build 100 of those pedals at a time, and maybe 3 times a year he'll release them, and they literally sell out in less than a minute. So that batch came out in January, and he announces ahead of time when they're releasing. So I woke up early enough to be, and I just had my phone ready, and I had like autofill ready, with my credit card information, all that stuff, autofill ready to go. And as soon as the clock hit, whatever it was, I was boom, 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 and I got it. And literally, I think it was 48 or 52 seconds, something like that, they were sold out. So they're so hard to get, but they're an absolute top-notch octave pedal. But yeah, so that's just one thing to know. And I love octave effects in worship music for big, big moments. They're so good at helping fill out the sound and just adding another level of like big, big lift for some of the big moments. So this is the one I'm using. And I'll demo it in a little bit in the context of a song. So then the next one, the one I'm replacing soon with that rat bass pedal. This pedal is a MBD2, which stands for MOSFET bass distortion, and it's made by a company I don't love the company name. The company name is called Damnation Audio. So on mine, it's funny enough, I don't know if you can see it, but I actually have painter's tape covering up the company name. Like, I don't want to use that in church, like, and it says Damnation Audio on the pedal. Yeah, like
pedal that was just, it was obscene, but it was a distortion pedal.
Yeah.
So I took all the knobs off. I painted it.
Oh, nice.
Just so you didn't know what
Yeah.
it was.
There's some companies, I think they just purposefully try to like.
It was such a good distortion. It was something called, I don't know, but it had like a demonic look to it.
Yeah.
It had like a demon scream.
Yeah.
Or something like that on it. I was like,
So I have the company name covered up with painter's tape because like, I just don't, Anyway, that one's being replaced very soon by the Commodore Rat Bass that I have ordered. And of course, my Aguilar tone hammer, like I have mine set exactly like the Bethel bass players do. And instead of using a separate Neve DI, I just go direct out of this. It sounds so good. It sounds really, really good. And then underneath, if you can see, I've got my power supply underneath. It's a Chalk Soul. It's fantastic because each output, you could set it at either 9, 12, 15, or 18 volts. So every
Your tone hammer at 9 or 18?
The tone hammer has to be 18. Now the cool thing about the tone hammer though is it'll also work on phantom power. So you can operate the tone hammer with phantom power, but I have it operating from here, and so it runs on 18. The other pedals are 9 volts, but you can actually set each output to the specific voltage you want, and it has a ton of current. It has plenty of current available, like you're not going to run out of headroom. So I love having isolated power for each different pedal. Sometimes when you, like if you get a one spot with the little daisy chain adapter, sometimes you could run into some noise and stuff if you're putting them all on the same power outlet. So I love having the power supply mounted underneath. So anyway, that's my worship board. Now I didn't bring my other one with me, but my pedal board that I use if I'm playing at home or all of the gigs I'll do outside of church, I kind of put what's on that one, but I'm not going to go through those. But I do have a tube DI on that one made by Con Audio that is just fantastic. Like I would put that DI up against I don't know if y'all seen the Noble. Like a lot of people use the Noble DI. I would put the Con up against the Noble.
Really?
Yeah, it's so good.
Is it cheaper than the Noble?
It is a lot. Yeah, a lot.
The
So
Noble's $1,000 now, just to get one even,
yeah.
if you get one.
So Obed, I think his first name is pronounced Obed, but Obed Khan used to work for MPEG. And he was the one who designed the MPEG tube DI. And then he left MPEG.
I've got the STI.
So Obed Khan designed that.
Yeah, I know. And it's got the scrambler. I've got the one with the scrambler circuit.
Oh, yeah, that's the newer
It's got
one.
the added scrambler. I've got the black one, not the new one.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the overdrive, it's incredible.
yeah. So he left MPEG and went and designed his own version. That's what I have on there. It's fantastic. And then my main basses. So I have an endorsement deal with Mike Lowell Basses. They're based out of Bellevue, Washington, which is right outside of Seattle. They're phenomenal. They're just fantastic. So I have a close relationship with them, and so I have two of their basses that were custom made for me, and but I have a Fender Mexican P bass that I also love. I have stripped that thing from head to toe, and that's when I got to gear nerd out. Like, all right, well, I'm going to put this pickup in it, and I'm going to put this bridge on it, and put these tuners on it, and so I kind of got to nerd out on my Mexican Fender P bass. So the next page, I'm not going to deep dive on the next page, but one of the big things for me is having my basses set up to where they play super comfortably for me. And when you go into a music store and you just grab a bass off the wall, most of the time they have not taken the time to set up their basses. And it's hard for me to play those. I mean, the strings may be that high off the fretboard, and man, I need to work out some more before I can play this bass. It may be really difficult to play. I like playing with low action. So learning how to do your own setups for me has been a very crucial thing. So I've been doing my own setups for years and years now. But having your bass properly set up is crucial to how it sounds and how easy it is to play. There's a lot of different schools of thought on how to set up a bass. You may see one manufacturer who says, set this measurement for neck relief, set this string height. Somebody else may say something totally different. But no matter what, there's 4 basic components of a basic setup on your bass. And they actually need to be done in this specific order. So the first thing you're going to set up on a bass is the neck relief, which is the curvature of the neck. And yeah, I'm probably telling you information you already know. But basses, they have a truss rod running inside the neck, and you adjust those, and that adjusts how much curve is in the neck. So on mine, the adjustment is right in here, and it's with a hex key, an Allen key. So I can put my hex key in here and adjust the truss rod to add more or less bow. The reasoning behind that, you want some bow in the neck, because when the string oscillates, you're going to get the largest oscillation in the center of the string. So when you bow your neck slightly, you're basically making room for the string to oscillate where it's going to oscillate the largest. Yeah. So when you're doing neck relief, there's ways to measure it, but I'll put a capo here, and then I'll fret here, and I'll use feeler gauges and measure halfway in between. And I kind of know like the measurement I like to have for mine.
And I have the StewMac feeler gauges.
Yeah,
'Cause I do-
those are
I
great.
do setups.
Nice.
Yeah.
But it's taken me a long time to kind of find exactly what I like. And a lot
There's
of
a new video up too now on YouTube from the StewMac guys.
okay, it's newer.
About Setup bass. It came out a month ago.
Oh, nice.
They-
I hadn't seen that one then.
No, they set up this. I think it's, may not be a jazz, but whatever it is, it's a Fender bass.
Yeah.
They set up a Fender bass and show you. Now they go into way more detail than any of us will ever want to do. They file the nut and do all that stuff. They do some extra.
Yeah.
They show you the basics of. Because when you set up a truss rod, you don't want to turn it like you don't want to turn it
Exactly.
every time.
Tiny
You do.
movements.
A quarter turn at a time.
Yeah.
Check it. Quarter turn at a time.
Yes.
Because you can split a neck.
Yeah.
Or a fretboard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And the second thing you want to adjust is the action, which is how high the strings are from the neck. So, one misconception that some people have is that adjust your truss rod to change the action. That is backwards. You never want to adjust your truss rod for the purpose of adjusting your action. You adjust the truss rod to get the bow of the neck where it needs to be. Then you adjust your saddle heights to get your action where you want. Now, one thing that most people will agree on is where to measure the string height. Most people will agree to measure at the 12th fret. There are some variations, like Fender recommends to measure at the 17th, but once you get past where the neck connects to the heel, some basses will start to have a ski ramp, as they call it, a ski jump. So once you get past that, you may be having some skewed readings. So the majority of people you're going to find will say to measure at the 12th. I do too. I measure at the 12th. And and there's certain measurements you're going to want to have. Then pickup height. This is a big deal, and a lot of people don't realize that having your pickups too close to the strings can actually cause some issues. And the magnetic pull, pickups have magnets in them, and if you have your pickup too close to the strings, you're going to get some magnetic pull, and it's going to cause some warbling sounds. It's going to affect your intonation. So I like to have mine a certain distance away from the strings, and I measure by fretting the last fret, and then I'll measure the distance there. But it's always better to err on the side of having your pickup a little bit further from the string. But anyway, there's measurements on that. And then lastly is intonation, and that's when you adjust your saddles either forward or back. And the common way to do that is to, you got a tuner. If you have a accurate strobe tuner, those are even more accurate. But you basically play your open string, get it in tune, then play your 12th fret, and you look at the intonation of that. So if your 12th fret is sharp, you're going to want to make your bridge go that way. Most of them, if your adjustments are here, you're going to turn them clockwise. Some instruments like my wife has a Les Paul. She plays guitar too. She has a Les Paul, and the adjustments are on this side. So, and of course, I'm her guitar tech. So, I'm my wife's drum tech, and I am my wife's guitar tech. I change her drum heads and tune them. I change her guitar strings, and that's right. So, I'm the.
She wanted a roadie. That's why
I'm also her roadie. I'm also my wife's roadie. So if she's having to play, I'm loading up the drums. Yeah. So, my wife is a band director too. She works with me at West Jones. So she's a percussionist. So I tell people it's so important to have a percussion instructor on your band staff. So I just married one. That's what I tell everybody. Yeah, it is. So for the rest of my career, I'm going to have a percussion instructor on my band staff. So anyway, but my wife's Les Paul, the adjustment screws are on the opposite side, so they're the other way. But anyway, bottom line is, I put down here, there's plenty of setup guides on the internet, and unfortunately many will tell you different methods of measurements, but there's one that I tend to agree with personally, and I put the website, it's Scott Feldstein, so you could actually go there, and his method of doing bass setups are pretty darn close to how I do mine. If you're not comfortable doing your own setups, take your bass to a good tech or luthier, bring it to Chuck, he can probably do it for you.
There's also another guy in town that does all kinds of, he's a luthier.
Is his last name Wolferton?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met him. I'm familiar with. Now I've never had any work done or anything, but I know who he is.
I played in the band with him
Oh, nice.
at one time.
So I put on here. I discovered guitar repair shop, luthier shop in New Orleans that I have I'm fully sold on them. It's Strange Guitar Works, Ben Strange, and his partner Aaron. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's Younce or Youncy. So Aaron used to be a luthier for Federa basses, which is like $20,000 bass guitars. So yeah, I need to borrow yours sometime. So
We need to talk. Yeah.
So Strange Guitar Works is in New Orleans. I went by there Monday. We dropped off my wife's Taylor acoustic to have a fret level done. So they have a Plek machine there, and yeah, I can deep dive on a Plek machine. I'm not gonna take, but basically that's like this super expensive machine that will level your frets. You mount your guitar or bass inside the machine, and they will level your frets more accurately than a human hand can do. Yeah. So
They've got one at C&M
in Kenner.
In Kenner.
Yeah, C&M Kenner does. But Strange Guitar Works has one, and those guys are absolute top-notch pros. I had my Fender Mexican bass plecked by them. Mike Lowell basses, so they have a Plek machine, and every instrument they build. They also build electric guitars that are absolutely phenomenal. Their whole thing is they do clones of Fender instruments. So like they'll build you a Strat clone, a Tele clone, a P-bass clone, a J-bass clone. But every instrument they built gets plecked. So that's just like this perfect fret leveling. So anyway, I gave Strange Guitar Works a shout out just because if you need something done, they're awesome. And then a little thing about strap height. This is just a personal preference, but it does really affect your playing. Like you watch videos of the old Nirvana videos, and you see their bass player, what's his name, Chris Novoselic, someone. His bass is down here at his kneecap, and he's playing it like this, and it makes your your wrist has to be like this to work. And I'm like, man, you're gonna have carpal tunnel one day. You are gonna get carpal tunnel.
Plus it limits your playing.
It does. It's just hard to fret well when you're way down there. But at the same time, there's some super hardcore jazz guys, and they'll have theirs up here. And to me, that does the same thing, but with your right hand.
That was me in the 80s. And that's why I don't do that anymore. My wrist and my elbow.
It does.
I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I used to rest my chin on top of my
Oh,
head.
wow.
I mean, I was a big Mark King fan.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great slapper.
And
Yes.
that's what I did, but because we're playing funk in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, my arm hurts.
And if you watch Jeff Berlin, I mean, his is way up here too. But so my thing is, if I'm sitting down, I want my bass to be the same height whether I'm sitting or standing. And I like for it to just barely touch my lap, but the strap is still holding the weight. So whether I'm practicing sitting down or standing up, my bass height isn't changing. So anyway, I'm going to move past that. So I just brought those for you guys, and I want to be mindful of my time. So the next thing I just actually want to talk about, some of my thoughts when it comes to playing worship music. And I've got a few songs that I have pulled up in Spotify, to play through here, just to talk over a few things. So the first one I have is Glorious Day, and y'all may do that one here. It's kind of an up-tempo driving song. So this is a song that, in this particular one, I don't ever engage a different sound. So I basically just keep my core tone hammer tone, like the whole song. And to take it into different sections, I just kind of change like what I'm playing and how heavy I'm playing. But a lot of musicians, you know, it's important to know when not to play and what not to play. And some musicians don't quite grasp that. So this is one of those where like the bass doesn't even play for the introduction or verse 1. So I'll play this one and just kind of talk through some things. And I'm just real big on, and this is me thinking as a band director now, my band director brain talking. But I'm all about songs having direction, and like I don't want to be as if somebody were speaking monotone. Like it's not fun to listen to somebody talk monotone. We don't want to treat our songs and play monotone. And like I'm going to be the same volume, the same intensity, the same. I'm just going to say the same thing the whole song. We want to make it go somewhere. We want to make our songs go on a journey. And that's something I try to teach like my high school band kids every day, especially when we're in concert band season and we're working on these like, you know, just beautiful pieces of music. They've got to go somewhere. They've got to go on a journey.
2 themes and heavy progression.
Yep. So this is Glorious Day. And I'm just using the tone hammer setting the whole time. If I could get it here. So this one, the bass doesn't even play for the intro or V1. We do this one at my church from time to time. Yeah, it's a great song.
Oh, it
I've
is.
done it in a minute.
Hadn't done it in a while, because they've been introduced.
But I'm all about like simplicity on this one. Like I don't add a lot of feels in this one. I just try to keep it simple, straightforward. Just diamonds. I don't do anything that sticks out. I just let it sustain until the next chord. I try not to distract from the lyrics. Then I just drive quarter notes in the chorus. And I'll let the tone hammer take care of that little bit of grunge for me. I'm doing that scraping, picking. And I just keep the quarters driving. But this is one of those, I do not get in the way of the song. I just lay back. And I drive the chorus again. And then the bridge comes down. And I'll talk about worship bridges in a bit. Hits on beats 2 and 4. drive the last chorus. Sometimes I'll add a few more passing tones in this last chorus. And this one I always turn and look at my wife and I wait for her to play that part. And I like to drive eighth notes as I'm exiting this song. So I brought that song prepared just to kind of bring up the point of like less is more so many times. And I enjoy a good like gospel song or whatever when I can have fun and like get around the fretboard a little bit more. That's all good and fun, but it's all about serving the song and making sure that the lyrics are what's the highlight of the song. So that one I don't do any different effects. I just kind of let the space in the verses speak for itself. Just less notes and then drive the choruses. But it's pretty simple and straightforward. But again, you could kind of just hear how that tone hammer just sits in the mix so well with a little bit of that grunge. So I was saying earlier that music always needs like direction and shape. And for me, instead of thinking about like one note at a time, I like to think of the longer phrase, like where am I going or where am I coming from? And I tell my students at school, like, always have direction with your playing. Like, think of where you're going with this phrase or where you're coming from so that you can give it more momentum. I use the term hills and valleys a lot. Like, there needs to be moments of the song where it sounds like you're on a hill, but then other moments when it sounds like you're in a valley. So that song, that's one of those examples where the verse is just sustained notes, but you drive the chorus. So a chorus, at 99.99% of the times, the chorus of a song, a worship song, should always be bigger than a verse. So whether that means you're like making an effect sound heavier, or you're playing heavier, or you're playing busier in the chorus, a chorus is always going to be a little bit bigger than the verse. And most modern worship songs that are out now, the bridge, it's almost like always the bridge is going to build somewhere. So many worship songs, the bridge will start kind of low key like that one, and it's going to build somewhere. So I always want to make sure that I'm building the bridge into this big final chorus. And for me, there's kind of like three main ways that we create contrast between different sections of a song. One can be volume. If you're playing a verse and you just kind of a little bit lower, you get to the chorus and you just dig in a little bit more. So volume is one way we can change between different sections of a song. Another is with your tone, like effects pedals. I'll play one in a moment where I am engaging other pedals. And then, of course, changing what you're playing from section to section. Like in that one, we let the verses sit back by just sustaining diamonds, and then the chorus driving some longer notes. Let's see. And I'm going to get to these others just so I don't run out of time. So the next one, I'm sure y'all have all played it, All Hail King Jesus. But this is the live version. So this one, I play fingerstyle, and I bring in my octave pedal in the last part of the bridge and the chorus just to make it like sound massive. I just want like this big wall of sound coming out on like the last part of the song. And I try to keep it laid back. Now, when I did the summer camp with Elisha this past summer, we did this one, but it was a different arrangement, I think. I think it was.
I vaguely remember it.
That's the one we usually play.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, she's our go-to on that one. The real high.
That's got a high voice.
Yeah.
So there's another example where like good musicians know when to not play.
Go get
So
a cup of coffee.
yeah, that's right. I mean, you wouldn't want to be
Doodling.
doing all that stuff in the middle of this.
Ruins the moment.
It does. I'll turn this up a little bit. And then more sustains. So I typically like to make the first chorus of a song be different, a little more laid back most of the times. And here I like to make sure I'm matching the kick drum. That's like bass player 101. The bass player and the kick drums got to be in sync. Then I'll drive here, just because we're going into a larger chorus. Then I'll drive the quarter notes in this. And this is a double chorus. And then we can start to build into the bridge. And at the end of this build, I kick on the octave pedal, and you'll hear kind of how that effect really lifts it. Just adds that extra girth. And just keep that rolling. I'll hang on to it, and that octave will hold until it goes to the next downbeat. And then it just fades out. So one thing about playing with octave pedals, earlier I talked about the tracking with them. An octave pedal will like tell on your technique. It will snitch on your technique. Because if you're not muting the other strings well, it's going to glitch. I mean, so if I let that string ring I mean, it's only going to hang on to one note at a time. It's monophonic. So it will really tell on your technique. And so like when I'm playing that line, even that little lick, I have to make sure that I'm very intentional about each note that I'm playing, or that the octave will glitch out. But I'll use that on a lot of songs just to add a big lift at the end. It's so, when you're in a big sanctuary with the subwoofers, it's just like, it just hits right here. I didn't mean to pound on the microphone, but it'll just hit you in the chest. Yeah.
It just hit
Yeah.
right there.
Oh man. All right. So I'm going to try to be sensitive with my time. So we talked about how I mentioned the bass guitar and the kick drum need to be like perfectly in sync and perfect pair. So the bass guitar is like the bridge between rhythm and the melody and harmony. So rhythm is drums, melody and harmony is your keys and guitars. The bass is the bridge between those two things. So you always want to make sure that what you're playing complements the kick drum. For example, I've heard this a million times, like if the drummer is playing on the kick, 1, 3 and, 1, 3 and, then the bass player don't need to be going 1 and 3, 1 and 3. So make sure that what you're playing complements the kick drum. That's a big deal. And for me, like the hi-hats and the ride cymbal are always my guide. Like that is, to me, I lock into the hi-hat and the ride, especially if I'm in situations where there's no metronome. Like if I'm playing a gig somewhere and there's no in-ears, there's no met, like that hi-hat or ride cymbal is going to be my metronome. And that'll often dictate what you're playing. And I tell my students this at school, I tell people this all the time, the percussionist, the drummer, is the bus driver, and we're all the passengers. So the drummer is driving the bus, and we're along for the ride. So where they go, we go. What they do, we do. So my wife and I have conversations about it, like, well, where are you going to go on this one? Okay, well, let's do this instead. So we talk that stuff out, because with her being the drummer, like, I'm riding her bus, so I'm going to go where she goes. The bass also establishes the bottom of the chord. And I can't remember who said, some famous musician said, nobody knows what the chord is until the bass decides what note they're going to play. So, we're either playing the root or we may be playing an inversion, but basically we're holding down the bottom. So I'm going to go to the next song. Just, again, I want to be sensitive with my time. So I know y'all have played this one 1,000 times, King of My Heart. The reason I want to demo this one is because there are so many different nuances. And I play this one with a pick. The Bethel guys play this one with a pick. But this one has so many different nuances. Like, for example, it uses a lot of palm muting. Oh, octave pedal still on. They'll do palm muting in this one. They use finger style at the beginning. Then they switch to a pick. Now, the Bethel bass players, they kick on their bass micro synth for the last chorus. I like to kick on my distortion pedal. That's just my personal preference. When I play this song, the last chorus, I'll kick on distortion. So instead of that last chorus, I'll go here. Just adds a little more thickness. You can hear that extra layer of distortion. So that's where I go on this one. But this has so many nuances, and this is just a great example of like not getting in the way of the song, letting the lyrics be what's the highlight, but also adding different textures by starts with finger style, switches to a pick, adds an effect pedal on the end of it. It's just a really cool journey that this song goes on. And another example of we don't play in the beginning. Like, it's good to know when to not play. I don't want to be like noodling and trying to, let me show you what scales I learned this week. Like, I'm going to stay out of the way. I always want the lyrics to be at the forefront of every worship song. Like, what's the song saying? just finger style is always more mellow. Sometimes I'll keep my pick in my mouth until it's time, but I'm just holding it right here. Now we go to palm muting. Does it again. Then I'll unmute. I don't have my distortion pedal on yet. When it comes back in, I'll be palm muting again, but up an octave. When it goes back to the chorus, that's when they kick on the micro synth. I usually kick on my distortion there. Then we'll open it up and go down an octave. And I'll really dig in here too. Then back to that, kind of like in the beginning, finger style. And I'll just keep my pick here. And then of course it fades out from there. I love that song. I love playing it. Not that any of it's technically difficult, but there's so many different textures. And that applies to so many worship songs that we'll end up playing. Just finding the different textures. Because I mean, it started with finger style. It went to a pick with palm mute, then opened up, you know. The beginning of the bridge was here, then opened up, and then the last chorus. And as raunchy and nasty as that sounds by itself, when you fit into a track and the sound engineer is working their magic, it just blends beautifully. And that's, to me, that's why I've been so like, I've loved Bethel's bass sound for years, and it took me a while to figure out why, but that's what they're doing. It's
Like me, I never realized.
I was the same.
Yeah.
Same. And when I started doing a deep dive research, and I found out, well, 95% of it is that Aguilar pedal that they're using. And like I said, you know, they're using the pick. The way they're scraping when they pick, they're all on a jazz bass with a neck pickup. All right, I got one more I'm going to do. And this one, I don't know if y'all do y'all do any Charity Gale songs here?
We do a Poplarville.
Yeah. So
We've done 2 down here, I think.
this is one we do at my church, New Name Written Down in Glory.
Oh.
So this one is one where like, all right, we can have a little more fun on because the style lends itself to it. To me, this is such a John Mayer style song.
Oh, yeah.
So when I play this one, it's finger style, but I rolled the tone knob all the way off. Like Pino Palladino is my favorite bass player on the planet.
That's the only way you can get flat wound sound.
Yeah.
Just I do that here. I turn my tone all the way down to get that dead.
Yeah. So this song really calls for it. This is almost like the opposite of what the Bethel people would do. But talking about, getting the most out of a song, like, I think every song will speak for itself as to what it needs. And again, my thing is always to serve the song. Like, yeah, I probably could have more personal fun, noodling more, but for the people out there listening, that's just going to distract. It's going to make the song itself sound worse. And I don't want to take away from the lyrics. Like, every song we do, we want Holy Spirit to move. We want Holy Spirit to minister. And we want the lyrics to speak. So I'm always trying to stay out of the way of the lyrics. But this is just one of those songs that lends itself to just a little bit more fun. But I turn the tone knob all the way down. And it's just got that John Mayer groove. Then I'll drive. And my church is very like, that's the stuff we do a lot at my church. And we'll have a lot of those moments where it's like, we may just go and have a worshipful moment for the next 5 minutes, and you just don't know where it's going to go. We may just like, we're going to find one another. So
Throwing up numbers.
yes. Well, I have the talkback mic.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah. So the keys player, the guitar player, we'll just tell them where to go. But our worship leader, she is our pastor's sister, and their father was the previous pastors for like long time. So she's been the worship. I've been playing there with her as the worship leader, like I said, for almost 20 years, and I know what she's thinking before she knows what she's thinking at this point. So the other musicians who haven't been playing with her as long as I have, I'm like, all right, this is what she's going to do, but I'll talk them through it. But that's just a song that, one of those examples where the bass gets to have a little more fun, but the style calls for it. Like, I would not try to play like that on King of My Heart or like Glorious Day that just needs to drive.
Charity Hill's stuff, though, her worship stuff is her worship stuff, but when she's ready to jump up and down, she lets everybody have their time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I could listen to anything she's ever recorded.
She is wonderful.
Oh, she's phenomenal.
She is wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I had 8:15 as kind of my like target for me to finish with what I had, but again, like, I may not have said anything tonight that you didn't already know, and I'm sure I could learn a lot from y'all just in talking. And but is there anything that I might could help with or answer, or anything that I said that you may have a question about, or just whatever?
I think you explained it quite well. Yeah, I can tell you're a teacher.
But
I
not today.
grew up with teachers.
Yeah.
Three of my aunts and my grandmother were all teachers, so I didn't have a chance.
Yeah,
But yeah, you explained that really well.
I appreciate it.
And covered a lot of material in a short amount of time.
But even if I said, like Elisha said earlier, even if it was just one thing that you might could take away, then I think that's great. But the bottom line is, we always want to serve the song. We want the lyrics to be the highlight, and we want Holy Spirit to just be able to operate through every song we do. We want Holy Spirit to be able to operate and do what He wants to do. And we don't want to get in the way of that by like, let me show what skills I learned this week, or I learned this new riff from YouTube. Let me see if I could fit it in. Like, no, I'll do that at home. Like, I'm not going to try to throw that into the middle of a song if I'm trying to make room for Holy Spirit to minister. And I want the congregation to know what the lyrics are saying, instead of like, oh, bass player learned a new riff this week. But there's, like that Charity Gale song, there's moments when we can have our time and we can have some fun because the style calls for it. So, but that's everything I had in my outline. And like I said, 8:15 was kind of my target, but I'm happy to like talk or discuss or anything. I mean, I could stay here till 2 a.m. talking about gear. I will nerd out over gear.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for him? Like any
Yeah, that's what he
specific,
was just saying.
any specific issues that like you find yourself struggling with a lot, like, or approaches that he has to how he approaches, whatever it may be.
And we talked a lot about the Bethel sound and the Bethel bass players. One thing I love about them is it doesn't matter which of their bassists are playing, there's always continuity. Because they have so many musicians they could rotate through, but there's always just incredible continuity no matter who's on bass. And they always sound like Bethel. It doesn't matter which of those guys are on bass, like
That's probably why
it sounds
they
like the
have that
Bethel bass
formula
players.
of gear,
Yeah.
and then end up in the Neve.
Yep.
Yeah, to control it.
But I think that's great that like,
Do you have it for all these guys that especially newer players? I don't think we have many newer players, except you. What is your approach to learning a new song?
For me at this point in my journey, I listen to it. And my church in particular, we are not one, we don't run backing tracks. And you never know where the form's going to go. We don't try to cover it note for note. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to sound like us doing it. Like, we're not going to sound like the recording.
But, I mean, when you learn something, you learn the movements. and where to go dynamically.
Yes, and I obviously like learning the chord progression first and foremost. That's kind of the biggest thing. Learning the chord progression first and foremost, learning where the dynamics are going to be. But a lot of it for my setting in particular at my church is just getting into rehearsal and then we talk it out, because our worship leader, you never know what she's going to do or where she's going to go. So she may change like the dynamics totally different from the recording. So we learn the song and how it's supposed to go. Then we get to rehearsal and then we're like, all right, this. But we have 4 musicians on stage, like bass, drums, keys, guitar. Me on bass, my wife on drums, and the keys player are all high school band directors. And the guitar player is a music major at William Carey, and his father is a band director. So he's, when we play, it's, I never have to give them too much of a bone. They're just able to do it. Like, I don't have to throw them a bone too much, like in the talkback mic, I don't have to say a whole lot because it's just they're going to do the thing.
Unless you're interpreting for the new people what the worship leader
Yeah.
is about to do.
Yeah, because you never know where she's going to go. But she's good about giving me hand signals, and I'll interpret that. But sometimes if I know what she's about to do, because I've been playing with her for like 20 years, I'll let them know, hey, she's probably going here next. But that's why we can't do backing tracks, because
She's going to change it.
yeah, it's the road map.
Cut it off anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
After like 30 seconds, we'd have to stop the backing track.
That's soon, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You never.
That's amazing.
But it always sounds good.
That's wonderful.
It's just that's what they do. So I've been used to it for a long time.
Method to the madness.
Yeah. I've played in several black gospel churches before, and because one of my really good friends is he's from Jackson, Mississippi, and he is Brandon Lake's keys player now. But I played in church with him. He used to play at my church in Hattiesburg for years, Joe Banks. So his primary church is that he lives in Nashville now. So he plays at Lyndall Cooley's church, Grace Church Nashville. But he also was playing for Brandon Lake on the last tour. But Joe's brother, Joe's father, they pastors some of the black churches in Jackson, Mississippi, and I've been up there and played with them many times, and I love those settings because you may not even know the songs before you get there. It's just all right, show up, plug in, all right, what we about to do, here we go, and you just don't know, and so I like being in that setting because kind of holds your feet to the fire, but so I say that to say that there's some of that semblance in my church and the way our worship team operates. But
That's cool.
but I appreciate y'all.
Hey, we appreciate you.
I appreciate y'all. I love this church. I love this ministry so much. I love Pastor Allen, and I love Elisha.
You're sinful pedal. I mean, you're.
Oh yeah.